Now we will look at some of the contributions of the right hemisphere. The right hemisphere has some talents in the linguistic realm. Normal individuals use the skills of both hemispheres to comprehend and produce language. So we need to examine some of the ways that the two hemispheres interact during language use. The interesting part in lateralization is the attempt to look at the ways both hemispheres contribute in language. It is a controversial matter and has been under debate for a very long time. The long-held view is that it is only the left hemisphere which deals with the language process and the right hemisphere has nothing to do with this. But this view has been questioned, and we have different studies who has proposed that right hemisphere has also some contribution to make. We have Mark Beeman, who proposes that right hemisphere has the ability to process language. The same view has been shared by Terence Dakin, who believes that right hemisphere is not non-language and that it is critically and intimately involved during both development as well as the maturity level when it comes to language processing. So in the light of these conflicting views, we will now look at the contribution of right hemisphere of the brain with regard to language processing or language use. Now, right hemisphere is better prepared than the left to appreciate some of the pragmatic aspects of the language. Based on number of studies, this has been something that has been proposed, and especially Kaplan, Brownell et al. This belief that this is something where we have the pragmatic aspects of language taken care of. Now, they examined the ability of individuals with right hemisphere brain damage to interpret conversational remarks. The subjects heard short sentences and described the performance of one character and the relationship between two characters, and then interpreted the utterance from one of the characters. Some of the utterances were literally true and some were literally false. The interpretation of the study further shows that the utterance is in part based on relationship between the two men. For example, you sure are a good golfer. You sure are a good golfer. Now, the interpretation of such a sentence where you sure are a good golfer depends upon the relationship between the one who is saying it and the person to whom it is being said. When it was friendly, the comment might be taken as something to encourage a friend, but when the relationship was hostile, it could be taken as a sarcastic statement. Kaplan and colleagues found that individuals with right hemisphere damage were as adept as control subjects in interpreting the literally true sentence, but were poorer at identifying the pragmatic intent of literally false utterance. Then we have another study conducted by Behrle, Brownell and Gardner, who examined comprehension of humorous material by individuals with right or left hemisphere damage. Individuals with either right or left hemisphere damage were presented with 3 frames from a cartoon and had to select the final frame that would be most humorous. Right hemisphere patients did more poorly than left hemisphere patients on this task. More importantly, they made different kinds of errors. Right hemisphere patients made errors by selecting an ending that, although it was funny, was unrelated to the previous frames. In contrast, left hemisphere patients selected an ending that was appropriate in content but not humorous. Similar results occurred with the verbal analog of the cartoon task. Bherle and her colleagues conclude that the right hemisphere is adept at detecting surprise, whereas the left hemisphere is better at preserving coherence. Appreciation of humor depends then on both hemispheres, the right and the left. Based on a study conducted by Sciarlo, it appears that both hemispheres play a role in interpretation of word meaning. Sciarlo suggests that we have two semantic systems, one in each hemisphere that we use to interpret linguistic meaning. In the realm of lexical ambiguity, it appears that the left hemisphere makes a rapid commitment to a particular meaning, whereas the right hemisphere maintains alternative meaning for a longer period of time. If so, the two hemispheres may play complementary roles in the comprehension of lexically ambiguous words. So the overall point is that language processes depend on the joint functioning of both hemispheres, the left hemisphere as well as the right hemisphere. In the words of Sciarlo, a consideration of the available neuropsychological data leads one to the view that processes subserved by each of the two cerebral hemispheres are necessary for the proper interpretation of words in context. So it's not just the left hemisphere, but we also see the contribution of right hemisphere in terms of language processes.